All right, here we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome. As a preliminary matter, this is Ruth Vivo, co-chair. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Adiola Mbeneme.
Here.
Juan Acosta.
Here.
Noor Ali. Jean Budenhagen.
Here.
Beth Cassavant.
Present.
Paula Collins.
Here.
Beth Delgado. Maura Egan.
I'm here. I just couldn't unmute myself.
Okay, thanks, Deb. I can't see because I'm on a different screen. Maura Egan. I think Maura is going to be a few minutes late. Jenny Fishman.
Present.
Thank you. Louise Barone.
Here.
Lindsay Heffernan.
Here.
Elizabeth Hilton. Donna Darrow. Joseph Kelly. Sorry, Kelly Joseph.
I'm here.
Thanks. Rup Jiu Kaur. Malin Kinnikar. Toya Mehta.
Here.
Rich Petrucci.
Present.
Priya Ratnam.
I'm here.
Leonora Ryan.
Present.
Janine Sands.
Here.
Navjeet Singh. Rajesh Ralagapudi.
Present.
Thank you. And
Rajesh present.
Rajesh present, okay, but not Navjeet, correct?
Navjeet
Yes,
also.
Navjeet's also present.
Oh, hi Navjeet. Nice to
Hi.
see you on here. Helene Wing. Alrighty. Was there anybody that either was not able to unmute themselves or came on a little late? All right. Good
Hi,
evening.
it's Donna Gerald. I'm here.
Oh, hi Donna. Thanks.
Hi.
Good evening. This open meeting of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. The order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded, so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For this meeting, the DEI Task Force is convening by Google Meet, as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please be sure to press *6 to mute your device. The meeting will not feature public comment. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So welcome everyone again. Today we're going to start with approving the minutes from 8/23. Do we have a motion to approve?
I motion to approve.
Thanks. Was that Priya? Do we have a second?
I second.
Thanks. Can
Who
those two people identify themselves, please?
Zoya seconded.
Zoya seconded. And who motioned?
I believe it was Deb Delgado.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Maura, you're on. Great. I was taking chicken notes. Chicken
I am
notes.
on, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so next. So today, two subcommittees are presenting public safety and education. They are going to present the recommendations, and we'll have time for questions, comments, etc. So I have public safety on here first. Is someone from public safety on that can present?
So, this is Donna, and I will have been the chair. However, I've been relying on the committee to pull together the final report, which we submitted. And we have not created any additional comments at this time, but we will be able to summarize the priority list. But the recommendations that are in the report are the recommendations of the committee at this point. And we could answer any questions, maybe, would be the best way. Or Beth, if you would like to add anything to that.
I think Kelly is on too, correct? And Juan? I think the whole committee is here.
So I'd be happy if someone else had wanted to take that, but I just wanted to make sure that we were.
I'm just,
So
Paula.
Donna, I don't think you were at the last meeting. The way that the other subcommittees presented was they just gave a brief overview of all of the recommendations and maybe a high level summary of what what you guys came up with.
Well, I'll let Kelly actually did the majority of the work in finalizing the report, and I think would be the right person to maybe speak to that. So, and then we can answer any questions.
Sounds good.
So I am not going to be able to present. If you can all hear my background, it is getting close to bedtime in my house. So if we want to rearrange the order to accommodate me, I'm not going to be available. I'm in my headset, but I can't be on screen and certainly can't be presenting any information for the next half hour. Or other members of our subcommittee could begin and I can jump on as soon as I'm available. But again, I think I fielded a lot of the questions last time, but I was not under the impression that I was going to be giving an overview. I thought the chair or the vice chair was going to be doing that today, and we would all be here to kind of respond and clarify. So I apologize if I'm not prepared. I wasn't ready to provide an overview of the entire report.
Totally understandable. Juan wanted to say something.
Yeah, I can certainly sympathize with you, Kelly, putting kids to bed. So what I'll do is I'll review the recommendations, bullet point, and then we'll just proceed to, request questions. For anybody who is not aware, the report is on the Google Drive, listed under the final reports drafts folder under public safety. Beth has a question.
I just know in the chat, Paula had asked if the report can be put on the screen. I can't remember if we did that last time or not.
We didn't
or
do that.
I think I was just looking at it in my drive then.
Yeah.
Paula, are you able to find it in your drive? Because if you aren't, maybe other people aren't also, and we can just quickly go through how to find it.
I guess I can. I'm not exactly a Google Drive expert person, so if I'm just wondering, this medium is really difficult for me because I think it's hard to maneuver. But I don't know if Beth, you can screen share if you have it. Thank you, Kelly. Let me see if I can just open it from that link. Yep. Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to do it. I mean, then it's just hard because you're looking at person and the thing. I like that. So I got it. Thank you.
I always just use
I can
two different
actually share it
devices,
on screen.
so
I can put it up on screen if you guys.
that would be
want.
great.
Yeah. Okay. I have it here. Let me just.
Because I have it on my computer and then I use my iPad for the meeting. Otherwise, plus I have it printed. I couldn't do this without lots of mediums.
Okay. All right, let me know when you guys can see it. It should be popping up really soon. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
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 It's the report. Yeah.
I see a hand raised.
Yeah, hi, this is Louise. When this report first went online, I had submitted some questions about it and comments about references where I went and looked at the reference and they didn't exactly support what was being claimed. And so I wonder if those questions and comments have been addressed.
The subcommittee has decided to leave the report as is.
Okay. Thank you.
I believe there's still some hands raised.
I was just going to say that I think maybe Juan, you can go through the report, and then Louise, I'm not sure that others on the committee would have seen your comments regarding the report. And then after the report is presented, that might be a good time to have a discussion that involves more members of the task force. But I think that we should start by having Juan go through the report.
I agree, Paula. Your hand is up. Can your comment wait till after? So Juan, if you could go over the report, and we'll do the same format as we did last time. We'll save questions and comments till the end.
Okay, thank you. First, I'll start with the with the problem statement. One moment. Okay, so the problem statement reads as follows: as a result of inadequate transparency, deficient investment in creating transformative culture and practice changes, and poor police community relations with residents of color, the town of Shrewsbury Police Department is unable to fulfill its mission to, quote, consistently deliver quality police service to the community, end quote. And we have several recommendations to be submitted to the Board of Selectmen. Total of 8. I'm just going to give you a bullet point of each, so I won't read the whole document. Number 1, end civil service in Shrewsbury. We recommend that the town initiate the process of opting out of civil service as a necessary step towards creating a public safety workforce that better mirrors the demographic composition of the residents in town. Number 2, race equity policy review. We recommend that the Shrewsbury Police Department hire an expert consultant to conduct a thorough and complete review of all police department policies and practices using a race equity lens. Number 3, end in-school resource officer program. We recommend ending the in-school resource officer program and instead focus on creating an alternative school safety/security plan and investing in new strategies and programs to foster positive police-youth interactions. Number 4, create a civilian review board. We recommend that Shrewsbury establish a civilian review board where residents can bring forth concerns or complaints of misconduct and discrimination. It is imperative that a civilian review board be designed to work for the people, not for our police. An effective civilian review board will be independent, transparent, resourced, and have investigative and disciplinary authority, including subpoena power. Number 5, create a permanent DEI committee. We recommend that the town adopt an ordinance establishing a permanent diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. This is a vital measure to ensure that the voices of historically excluded and discriminated populations be centered in Shrewsbury's decision-making. Number 6, training. We recommend that Shrewsbury Police Department incorporate a number of supplemental trainings into their mandatory requirements for staff that focus on cognitive, emotional, social, and moral competencies. It is also recommended that Shrewsbury Police Department implement a self-assessment tool to help personnel measure and understand their own implicit biases. These findings will help inform individual and departmental professional development and training needs. Number 7, community engagement. We recommend that Shrewsbury establish a public safety engagement board comprised of public safety representatives, residents, local businesses, and community leaders. Number 8, collection and tracking of data. We recommend that Shrewsbury Police Department create a data governance system to establish practices and protocol in how data is being collected, tracked, and used to inform decision making. Number 8, remove thin blue line symbol. We recommend that the Shrewsbury Police Department take immediate steps to phase out the thin blue line symbol from its uniforms and other department-issued equipment. Ongoing use of this divisive image harms law enforcement relationships, especially with communities of color who find this symbol threatening. And those are the 8 recommendations we have on the report. They're not, just to let you know, they're not in any particular order, so they're not ranked or anything like that.
Right, hang on.
Thanks, Juan. So we'll start fielding questions. If people have questions, they can put up their hand. Paula, I see you first. Go ahead.
So first of all, this committee did an amazing job at being super thorough. I want to just appreciate how organized this is and how many points they hit. I guess there's a couple things that I have questions about. One is that the civil service, I think, was already addressed in the employment area, and I think that may be where it belongs in terms of as we do our overall report. And then I wondered in the community, do they have a community liaison now in the department? Do they have one person even that is responsible for that, for community outreach? No, I see Donna shaking her head. Yeah, that's crazy. I guess the only comment.
Well, let me say it this way: there's not a person identified who that is their role. Like that is their primary role.
Interesting, yeah, because like in Fitchburg, they have a specific officer that's what they're. They're the lead, which is very interesting that Shrewsbury never did that. I think the only thing that bothers me in this report is I think that the problem statement is very aggressive. And I'm concerned that by writing it the way that it's written, they may not get to the rest of it. It might put people's backs up and then they may not get any further. I would suggest using different language to say the same thing. Using words like inadequate and deficient may not be the best way to get the job done.
Thanks, Paula.
I think the recommendations are fantastic.
Can I also add, for the people who weren't here for our last meeting when the other subcommittees presented, that I think we had decided that, or we were giving all the subcommittees a suggestion that your final report, that this report should be shared with your stakeholders prior to us releasing it to the BOS. So for the Public Safety Committee, we would suggest that you send this along to anybody that you had invited to any of your meetings, etc.
Yeah,
I already took care of that for the Public
Great.
Safety Subcommittee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks, Donna. Beth, was that your comment with your hand up? Okay, Jenny, you're next.
So I'm wondering, did you investigate at all about how wellness visits or wellness checks are conducted, and if there is a social worker engaged during that process? Or if it's just police that do it?
So we did not get a chance to talk in depth with the fire chief to talk about wellness checks. So from the police standpoint, I don't think that we dove into that in any detail. Was there something specific you were wanting to focus on?
Well, I know in many communities, wellness checks are conducted by the police officers.
Yes.
And sometimes they are not properly trained, especially around mental illness or other kinds of disabilities. So I'm just wondering whether or not that was explored with them. Because I feel like it's important to have, if not have them lead the visit, at least be part of the visit, a social worker of some capacity.
So I think there's a couple of things that when we met with the police chief, we wanted to hear their kind of strategy, their 1 year, 2 year strategy. What were they working on? And there was a lot of opportunity, shall I say, to add more resources to the police department. I don't think that they have those resources today. So what you're referring to, I think, is do they have social workers on staff in the police department instead of the officers themselves responding, correct? Is that what you're asking? Or are you asking, are they trained to respond? Or because I don't think there were social workers on the staff in the org chart that we were looking at. Beth, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. So there are not social workers currently, and those of you that recall the override that just passed this past May, there's funding there for social workers. And again, I believe you made the point, Donna, that there is definitely need for increased budget in the police budget in order to meet the needs that are out there in the community, especially insofar as social workers. Like, one would not be enough. We would likely need 2 or possibly 3 in order to meet the need of the community. And I know that's something that Chief Anderson is very much interested in doing, and something that's a goal of the department.
All right, that's great to hear, because a lot of times it's those type of situations that can turn into a bad outcome, unfortunately, because people aren't properly trained.
No, he has, the chief has a strategic plan, and that is part of his strategic plan.
I think that is, if I could say anything, that's how the recommendations are to align, because there's a lot happening in this area at the state level. Locally, the police chief has new strategy, and now we have funding. And so there's a desire to do that with transparency and with the community engaged, and to rethink maybe some of the approaches that were on the table before we started doing this work, say in the first year of Chief Anderson's program. So we're kind of at that crossroads now where new opportunities are popping up to all around us to do something different. And these are the areas that we're hoping to focus on.
All right, well, that's good. That's yeah, I think that's good. I'm glad to hear it's part of the plan. I know it's a conversation that's happening nationwide.
Yes,
So,
and we want to keep it going, is the point. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Lindsay next.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to, 2 comments. I think the idea of a permanent DEI committee feels like it's much broader than just the issue of public safety, unless you wanted a committee that was just about public safety. So leave that as sort of an open question, maybe to Donna. If it's for the whole of the town and all of these different issues, then maybe it doesn't belong nestled in here, but is sort of a broader statement, and maybe our chairs can take that and do with it as you want. I wanted to talk through the SRO program a little bit, and I had an opportunity to have, albeit a very brief, but a conversation with some of the school administration. And I don't know if anybody on your committee had a chance to talk to the school leadership about our SRO program. I see Donna shaking her head, so I'm going to go with no, that didn't happen. Okay. I think at this point in time, from where the school administration sits, I appreciate the reports and the sites about what sort of the school to prison pipeline has looked like in America. I'm not here to debate any of that. But from the school's perspective, the SRO program in Shrewsbury has not followed that traditional model and has been a really important piece of school safety. And so prior to the SRO program and having some officers who were both trained and designated, if schools did have problems, they'd get any other random officer who would sort of show up with an issue. And both administrators and building leaders have found having a designated point person to drastically streamline issues that may arise, and having somebody who sort of knows what's going on with the schools. I know they also do a lot of work on supporting school safety more broadly, and the issue. I know there's I think a tabletop exercise coming up where all the different emergency responders are kind of running triage or scenarios about safety in schools and school campuses from external threats. And so I appreciate where it's coming from, but I'm concerned that there is a need that's being filled there. And so I just would love to hear a little bit more about whether the concerns stem from more national pieces or stem from conversations you heard or things people have heard about the program here in Shrewsbury. So I hope those can be curious to learn a little more.
So I welcome Juan to maybe make a comment, and then I can add some thoughts to that. Or I think Kelly now might have some availability as well. So Juan, you want to maybe touch on that?
Sure. We did have a conversation with the chief of police, and that was one of the questions that was brought up during our conversation with them about the existing SRO program. And it became his question, or his line of answering did not focus on the public safety aspect or school safety aspect, actually, let me rephrase, on the school safety aspect of having an SRO officer in the school system. His main objective, the way I came across with it, was that it was more of a mentoring role. So doing some research, SRO officers have multiple duties. One is primarily law enforcement, because they're sworn officers in the school setting, I mean. Also mentoring, that's the second one. Third is teaching. So in some school systems, they actually do teach. Again, like when we had that conversation with the chief, the school safety aspect was not front and center. It was the fact that it was more of a mentoring role. He did emphasize that if an arrest has to be made in relation to an incident in a school, that the arrest is made off school site. So although we are recommending that the SRO program is ended, there's always room for conversation. I believe the recommendation is that it should be ended, but the Board of Selectmen has to, in their wisdom, decide how to proceed. They may choose to not take up the question. They may decide to just pursue more information on the fact, meaning conversation with the school committee, conversation with the police department. At a minimum, review the program. Is the proper training in place? Is the program achieving its objectives? Because again, as you stated, Lindsay, through the school committee and from what you're hearing from the administrators, the focus on your side is the public safety component, school safety component, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I wasn't that focused on that conversation. So I think at a minimum, it should be an ongoing conversation.
Donna, if I can, and I know Kelly has something, I just would want to, so certainly my last conversation with Superintendent Sawyer was, it was brief. It wasn't detailed. He wasn't looking at data reports, but he knew of a handful of young people over probably a good decade that had been arrested in schools. And by and large, those arrests had not happened by school resource officers, but had happened because of some outside complaint where people knew that the young person could be found in the school. That's an interesting conversation for us to have as a community, if that's appropriate or a good idea. I do know that there is some changes at the state level around school resource officers, and an opportunity for our community to relook at the program and relook at potentially the MOU. There's an MOU that dictates the responsibilities between the schools and the Board of Selectmen. And I might encourage your committee to contemplate the idea of, instead of abolish, to do exactly as you said, Juan, to take a hard look at it and ask, is it meeting our needs, or do we want to take this opportunity to look at that MOU, ask, is it focused in the ways that we think it should be focused? So clearly, I think we're hearing two slightly different points of view about what the purpose of the program is. I'm sorry.
I'd like to point out
go ahead, Juan.
Donna, one more point before I proceed. Going back to your first comment, Lindsay, about the permanent DEI committee and being focused. on public safety. The way I believe our subcommittee, and correct me if I'm wrong, Donna, I believe the way we looked at it is there should be a permanent DEI committee to look at all issues, not necessarily just public safety.
Right.
It is in our recommendations, but we understand that the same recommendation may land on another subcommittee's report. And if there is a ongoing, or if a DEI committee is approved by the Board of Selectmen, and it continues to look at these issues on a looking forward basis, this is one area that they can certainly look at in combination with the Board of Selectmen, with the school committee, the police department, to really assess the program and determine whether this is something that should be maintained or should be adjusted or abolished.
And I'll just add to that, the getting more feedback and stakeholders from the students, especially the students of color, about some of the implicit biases that exist. And when you do that at an elementary or a middle school level, it really has some impact on the students, which is the national conversation, but it was reinforced with conversations with students in the Shrewsbury schools. So I think that they're students of color in the Shrewsbury schools.
Donna, could I add a
Kelly,
small
yes.
piece? Thank
Yes.
you. I just I just wanted to I think validate some of what Lindsay had mentioned, because I think this was one that we knew in our small subcommittee would be a topic of conversation. And in fact, at one point I was on the opposite side of the fence as to having this as a recommendation because of what you just mentioned. I know that there are some strong feelings about school resource officers programs in general. And what I think really cemented this as part of our final report was just that the research overwhelmingly suggests that school resource officers have no measurable impact on school safety. And instead, what they end up spending most of their time doing, as Juan alluded to, is doing social work responsibilities, mentoring responsibilities. So it's an interesting dichotomy that we're seeing in the community. We're having this shift towards police officers are doing too much social services and too much behavioral health kind of management in the community. Let's bring in social workers. And then we have a great opportunity, I think, to eliminate a school resource officer program that's not serving its purpose and instead bring in clinicians and additional support staff, therapeutic support staff that seems like that's where the real need is in our school systems. And so that's why, and we knew that this would be pushing the envelope a little bit, but this is the exact, I think, type of conversation and further inquiry that we were hoping putting this recommendation on here would promote, is that if we could stand up a permanent committee within the town that is charged with exploring and providing further recommendations, that this is maybe something that they could explore further, take the pulse of the student body, particularly, as Donna said, with attention to the students of color, who may, if you're looking at the aggregate, their voices may get lost, right? If we're just saying, do you like the school resource officer program, and we're not disaggregating for race, we could be missing a huge red flag. So I just wanted to add that additional that like layer of context and the rationale for why this ultimately did end up on the report.
Excuse me for interrupting, but I've had my hand up for quite a while. So first I want to apologize because, as I did tell the committee chairs, I do have a hard stop. I must leave now. But I would ask you to please also discuss and Kelly, you made a lot of sense there. What I would like to suggest, though, is that you try to make the report more directly say what it is you want. The other, as opposed to having to take additional verbal clarification to communicate what you really intended it to say. But the other point that I would ask you to discuss with the DEI task force in general is the establishment of a civilian review board with subpoena power. The reason being that I looked into the references that you cited, and the general consensus is that civilian review boards don't work. And so I apologize, but I must leave now. So thank you very, I think you did a wonderful job. All of the other concerns that I expressed are, as you put it, largely wordsmithing. So have a good time, guys. Sorry.
Okay, so Jean, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, I just have a couple comments. I was very surprised that you'd want to eliminate resource officers. I think they've been a plus in this town for a number of years. I think they've solved a lot of problems, and I think they've helped the kids a great deal. But an incident that just happened last week in the Worcester Public Schools, without a resource officer close by, there could have been some fatalities, and I think it's very important to maintain that program myself. That's my personal feelings on it, but last week was a good example in the city of Worcester with weapons involved against the school principal and a resource officer able to intervene and, stop the situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean. Does anybody have a comment to that from the public safety, or would we like to go on to the next?
Well, go ahead, Kelly.
I was just going to comment that Worcester is actually eliminating their SRO program to focus on creating alternatives to school safety and security plans, and instead investing in new strategies and programs to foster positive youth-police interactions. So if Worcester can do it and make the commitment, I think a community like Shrewsbury, it's incumbent upon us to do it.
Thank you, Kelly. Jenny, you have your hand up.
Thank you. So I was just curious, Lindsay, do you know if the resource, not yours, but do you know if the resource officers are aware of the Family Resource Center in Worcester, which is actually born out of Chapter 240, which is around CRAs? I know the Office of the Child Advocate is going to be sending out or be part of this mass mailing of resources for them, but it's a nice diversion opportunity for them to tap into. And if they're engaged with the school liaisons.
Yeah, if I can, Ruth, I can't say specifically that I am involved particularly in their training, and I don't work at the schools. I'm happy to follow up though. I think I think many of you know, I spent 14 years working in the juvenile justice system. I feel really passionately about what are appropriate roles for school resource officers and what are not. I want us to think about the idea of framing. We should have a community conversation about it and not necessarily come out of the gate and say the solution is to eliminate it before we know what does the data tell us about our program and what are the benefits and the cons. And Jeannie, I think a very, very legitimate question to ask there is sort of what sort of training and support are there and are provided. I don't know the two officers personally. I'm very much removed as just an elected member on the school committee, but I think there are. I was surprised by how strong our administrative leaders thought that they found value in it. So that's just another important perspective for us to consider here.
Sure. Maybe we could talk offline about it.
Yeah, I'd love to. Please.
Yeah, because I think it's a resource for them to tap into that they may not, because they think of it as being in Worcester, but it's really supposed to be serving a wide community.
Absolutely.
So
I'm totally in agreement with you. It should be serving all of basically our entire county, right? But for North Central, I think has one. Yeah. And I think I know the education committee is coming up in a little bit, and we are trying to figure out time to meet with Dr. Sawyer and his leadership team to sort of share out some of our recommendations and have that conversation. And happy to make that either slightly more open and invite a couple folks from the public safety committee, or at least share back with all of you some of their thoughts, because it was a fairly informal conversation, but an opportunity for me to learn how they felt about it.
Thanks, Lindsay. That's all I wanted to add.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Lindsay. So I had my hand up next. I didn't want to just jump in front of everybody. So we have discussed a few times about putting a permanent DEI task force as, something that's coming from all of us. So what do you guys think about having it? So right now, coming from all of us is a landing page that will, I think, replace, or we'll probably recommend will replace or they can add to the DEI site that is on the Shrewsbury page now, right? With resources that you guys have all sent. If you haven't sent them along, please send those websites along. That would be for residents to, to be able to quickly find things that all of the subcommittees have been working on, but also creating a DEI committee. So should it be only coming from overarching, or should it be from overarching and then specifically for the different subcommittees that want to keep it as a recommendation? I see some no's. So
Ruth,
I'm gonna, who was that?
sorry to interrupt, Ruth. It's Kelly. The intention for, I think I explained this last time, but I'll reiterate because I know a lot of people weren't there. The intention for us putting that recommendation on there was just to validate the need for a more permanent town structure. That's not meant to be a public safety specific. That was, yes, that was overarching for us to elevate to a kind of a general recommendation section of the report. We had just included it in ours because we wanted to make sure that we as a committee were voicing our support for having an entity that could carry on the work that this task force has begun. So absolutely, we can take that recommendation and put it into a kind of more general rec section of the final report. I think I speak on behalf of our group to say that we're absolutely fine with that.
Awesome, thanks, Kelly. And are there any other subcommittees that have any recommendations that they'd like to go into the general section that have an overarching, that are overarching rather than very specific to their subcommittee? All right, well, if you guys think of anything, while we're writing this, just send us an email.
I think the civil service system might be one that crosses several committees. It definitely isn't one in ours, and maybe some other government positions. I'm not sure.
I think it was in the employment one, but that to me is not overarching. So maybe,
okay.
And that's what I personally think. If there's a different consensus, then I'd be more than happy to move it into the general recommendations. But maybe we keep it where they are now. So in the public safety and in the employment, just so that they can see how much weight it carries, right? Beth, do you have anything to comment on this? Just as, being who you are.
So I do actually, and we did not have a chance as a subcommittee to really go over this report. And so I have a question regarding the Civilian Review Board. That's something that, to me, I'm trying to figure out. Who would the review board report to? And again, not wanting to violate any sort of open meeting law, haven't had the opportunity to really ask the rest of the committee, but maybe in this forum, Kelly or Juan or Donna could answer that question for me.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think it was Elizabeth, who I didn't see pop on, so I don't think she's here. I think it was Elizabeth, and as well as myself, who identified this in some of our preliminary conversations as wanting to discuss and see it move forward potentially as a recommendation. I think similar to the SRO conversation, there's a lot to unpack. Like there's not like a prefabbed, here's a civilian review board, implement it, right? There are many different types of CRB models. And so I don't think I can accurately answer that question, because I think depending on the type of model and depending on kind of the characteristics of that model and what's being used in different communities, there's a different kind of reporting authority or a different kind of leadership structure in place. So I would say for now, it's not fully fleshed out or fully decided. I think that would need to be something, again, that maybe a permanent DEI group further explored and looked for the best way to implement in a community like Shrewsbury with some of the infrastructure that we may already have.
Donna, are you planning that we're going to have an additional meeting following this meeting to finalize our recommendations?
We can definitely do that. What I will say, I'm trying to keep on the schedules, I think picking up where we were as a committee and how the information came together. Overall, there's a lot of opportunity to increase presence, relationships with the Shrewsbury Police Department, and we suspect the fire department as well to a lesser extent. And we looked at what are successful initiatives or new initiatives that seem to have a new direction, and this was one of them. There is community policing. We did not have time to go into all of that detail to say we have the final plan. And so I think what we're really saying is that there's a lot more work to do, and we want the community engaged in that work, which it is not clear to us that it's happening with the police today. And we're saying that it should happen at many levels. It should happen with them wanting to enhance their presence in our community in a more positive way, as well as more transparency and oversight. There are communities in Massachusetts, including, the Boston history with community policing under Willie Gross, that were successful. And there are others that, were not successful. I think that's what we're going to see when we're talking about dealing with public safety and a systemic issue, if I may say so. So I think what we're saying is that we need to have that engagement. If they're who they will report to, I think is something we would want to say to the selectmen. Who should they report to? What is the right way to get that feedback to that makes the police continue to want to engage? And so that's where I think I was coming from, where we didn't go into that detail because I didn't know that that's what we needed to do. And I appreciate, go ahead.
So I guess to me, I am thinking that is more like number 7 with community engagement. I think that number 4, that civilian review board, to put it out there without having it fully fleshed out, there
have been some, Ashland, I'll be happy to provide some consultants who can, in the public safety arena, and I'm sure there are others who can kind of tell us what those look like and who they should report to if we want to go into that more. I don't know, Beth.
I also think we probably should have another subcommittee meeting to flesh this out before we decide that this is our final report. But at the same time, there is a role here that's played by the town manager in overseeing all of these aspects related to police conduct, I guess, if you would. And so in this case, with the subpoena power, I guess I would really want to understand, who are they reporting to? It's a lot of power to give just an average citizen. I think we really need to think about it.
Yeah, I don't disagree, Beth. I think that the challenge that we faced, though, is that we can't fully flesh out a structure of a prospective community review board because we don't have the right players at the table, and we definitely don't have the time, right? Like, this task force was a year-long project. And so, but I do agree with your point. I think this is maybe worth further discussion in our subcommittee to feel out how we can craft a recommendation around CRBs that maybe we all feel comfortable putting forward. And maybe it is further exploration. But I think that was had we had the time and had we had the right people. Like, you can't create a civilian review board without civilians. And we're only a small subset, and we certainly weren't engaged with the police department in any sort of really meaningful way to start working on this. It just wasn't the charge of this group to create a civilian review board. But knowing what we know about police accountability and trust, particularly with communities of color, this is often a mechanism that's used to help get police departments to a place of accountability. True accountability with the community that they are required to serve. So I definitely agree. We can table this for a subcommittee meeting and talk more.
Thanks.
So that being said, I know that there are a few people that have had their hand up for a while. we don't have that much time to put this report together, right? So this report is due, the final report, to the board in about, I think, 4 weeks. So I think the Public Safety Subcommittee is the only one that wants to meet again, or that needs to meet again to finalize their report. Will you guys be able to do so maybe this week at the latest, early next week, and send us a final report?
So I think we'll have to connect. I have not had the time to continue to meet, unfortunately. And so I have relied on the committee to continue to do the work. And next 3 or 4 weeks, I will not have, we can try, but I know the 7:30 period of time that we've normally met, I've not been able to. So we can either do it by email or we can try to have a meeting. I won't, I'm just being honest. So just really trying to get this, again, we can review one more time. I'll be happy to try to pull a meeting together.
All right, Donna, thanks. I'm sure we'll be able to work it out, but just so that everyone is aware of the timelines, does anybody have the timeline that I had sent to you guys? Let's see. Sorry, I'm just looking for timelines. So we have to submit to the Board of Selectmen by October 13th. And then Adiola and I hopefully, many or all of you can join the meeting the following week on October 19th, where the board wants us to speak to this. All right.
Yes,
so,
I saw that.
Okay. So Leonora, you have your hand up. I'm sorry it took us so long to get to you, but you're next.
I was just wondering, can you define for me what you mean by a thin blue line?
Yeah, so is there anybody on the public safety that can take that? Otherwise I don't know a lot about it. I just know what I see, online and what my friends and family think of it.
Yeah, so, and Chief Anderson nicely defined this for us, right? So it says the thin blue line flag features a black and white image of the American flag with a horizontal stripe beneath the field of white stars on a black background. So you've probably seen this. It looks like a black and white version of an American flag, and that it has one kind of deep blue stripe right in the middle of it. This was came to us through, I can't recall, I think it might have been one of our subcommittee members said that they had heard from a member of the public who saw that imagery on a Shrewsbury PD motorcycle police officer helmet. That is often, as I think Ruth may have just alluded to, it's an image that has been unfortunately co-opted by extremists and is very often flown kind of in conjunction with the Nazi flag, with kind of white supremacy groups, far right nationalist terrorist organizations. So unfortunately, it has now been, from many people, is now seen as a very threatening symbol. So we had put out the question to Chief Anderson as to whether or not that was allowed for an officer to display that on their uniform while they're on duty. And he actually indicated that it's part of their uniform. So the recommendation, and I'll give credit to Elizabeth, who I think most wrote kind of the bulk of this recommendation, was that we encourage SPD to take steps to phase this symbol out of their uniform, whether it's on the police helmets, whether that's on, an arm patch. I'm not sure where else it may find itself. But this is an incredibly divisive and threatening image, particularly to communities of color. So this is clearly not going to do us any good as we're trying to support better police community relationships. So does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Sure thing.
Thanks, Kelly.
So I just can I add to that a little bit? It actually really came to fruition in 2014 in response to the Black Lives Matter. So that's why it definitely seen as being threatening to people of color.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Kelly, for the explanation. Rich,
Richard also has his hand up. Ruth,
Yep.
I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, Rich and then Jenny. Oh, just Rich.
All right. Well, just since the employment committee was mentioned a couple of times, the civil service, we kind of stole that from, it wasn't one of our main focus. It's kind of it's just a sub bullet point. So I think we should keep it here in this report, in this recommendation.
So take it out of the employment and put it in public
No,
safety.
we kind of did it as a backup. I mean,
Okay.
it is. I think it affects mostly the police and fire. So.
Okay, so it's okay with you if we take it out of the employment?
If you don't want it, yes. I mean,
Okay.
it was we'd have to look at it
Okay.
where it was. Like I said, it was. Our format was a little different. We had, our main recommendation with sub bullet points. So, and then similarly, the whole thing about the permanent DEI committee, I was a little confused, and I don't know if we were from one of our last conversations. We actually added something because we thought we were kind of just backing up the overall. We thought it was going to be an overall recommendation. So again, if we're going to take them out and make it overall, we could do that. And then I didn't get to speak with, there was another question about what other might be an overall recommendation. I know we made a lot about the collection and tracking of data in general. So I don't know if all committees have that kind of a take on things, that should be maybe a general recommendation, or if the data is specific to each committee, then just leave it in each one. But
I'm sorry, Rich, what was that last one?
They have their number 8, their first number 8, not their second number 8.
Okay.
The collection and tracking of data.
Okay. Yep.
I just was wondering if we had that general theme also, and I'm just saying, I don't know if the other subcommittees had a similar, take on making that maybe a more general recommendation from the overall committee. But
I think I didn't see it in anybody else's, and I think that employment and public safety has the most in common. So we can keep it in both.
And then just while I'm chiming in, the resource officer, I guess I had similar questions as people had, and I guess one of it was just for me, do they really have input into who gets suspended?
I see Deb shaking her head.
Was there did someone imply that?
Well, I think that's part of the some of the things you kind of state. The report kind of states national trends, and it says, students with disabilities and Black students are suspended at highest rates. And I guess I didn't get I don't know much about how the SRO works, and so I was curious if they actually have input into that.
I think
so.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say the Office of the Child Advocate in Massachusetts does have information that, and also Massachusetts Health Law Advocates, that youth of color are referred further down the judicial pipeline than their peers of, that are white. They get sent to more diversion programs. So with the resource officers, they can actually have some commentary on whether or not somebody is considered a CRA, child requiring assistance, which then gets you put into the juvenile justice system.
Okay. So that was just more of a information.
And Deb, you had your hand up?
All right. Thank you.
I've worked many years as a school principal, and there were limited suspensions, and they're very, very hard decisions to make to suspend somebody. But at times it has to be. But I never called in a resource officer to help me make that decision. So, you know, the school resource officer in the districts that I worked did not have that role. Just sharing.
Thanks, Deb. Lindsay, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just wanted to respond to Rich. I think what the administration would tell you here is this SROs are not involved in discipline decisions. They have no input in saying Lindsay should get suspended, and in fact would go farther and say they're not involved in investigations in the same way many other districts have been criticized for. But no, they don't. The data that's being reported from Assabet Valley is certainly an important piece, and you'll hear about in the education report out about tracking, making sure our discipline policies are being applied equitably is an important question for us to be asking. I think it's the connection of discipline to SROs. That certainly happens in other jurisdictions, and it's not quite as clear yet to me that we have the same magnitude of a problem here.
Thanks, Lindsay. Kelly?
Yeah, I think the uncomfortable conversation that we all tiptoe around is that obviously I think SROs are the flashpoint for it, but ultimately all of our institutions are racist, right? Like I work in healthcare. There's a lot of institutional and systemic racism embedded in the healthcare system, and the same thing goes for education. And the fact of the matter is that Black and brown children are seen as criminals even as early as 5, 6, 7 years old, and are more likely to be referred, I think, by anyone working in a school system for disciplinary action, whereas white children are going to be seen as children, which is what we should all be looking at them as. But this is, I think, the correlation, and this is the concern, I think, that is so deeply embedded with having law enforcement officers in our children's schools, is that we are all prone to racial bias and implicit bias. I'm in no way making accusations against any individual or any school system, but these are very real things that we need to be having conversations about. So although a particular school resource officer may not have the ability to wield a wand and say this student should be disciplined, whereas this student should get off with a warning, these beliefs that we have about who are good and who are bad, who should get a warning and who should get discipline, are deeply, deeply racialized. So that's coming out whether or not a school resource officer is there or not. But certainly having law enforcement on site, I think that's the correlation that is of concern when we talk about inequitable rates of discipline in schools. So I just wanted to add that. And I know that is, again, somebody working in the health field. We have our healthcare system is racist. And again, we're talking at system kind of institution levels, not individual choices, but we've all been bred in these environments that have led us to having outcomes that are inequitable for different groups.
Thank you, Kelly. So I don't see any other hands up. Is there anything else before the education group goes? I'd like to take a 5-minute break also before we do that. All right, so before we go on a 5-minute break, I did put in the chat section the timelines for the next few weeks, or what's happening for the next few weeks. So look it over and we can chat about it when we come back. So it's 8:08. We'll come back at 8:13.
Thanks, Ruth.
And we're back. Hi, everyone. All right, so next on the agenda is the Education Subcommittee will present their recommendations. Is there anybody from that subcommittee that would like to go?
Yes, there is.
Awesome.
Hang on a second, let me just pull it back up. So yes, Education Subcommittee. First, I just want to thank the awesome Education Subcommittee, Lindsay, Priya, Rajesh, Deb, Adiola, and Helene. They have worked tirelessly, especially the night, to get this proposal done. And we have in Google Drive, it's the updated one, the most updated. It said updated for education DEI proposal. I think it was put in there either on Friday or on Monday.
I just dropped it in the text if anybody wants to open it.
All right, thank you.
More, do you want me to put it on my screen or?
Sure, because I have it on my iPad, but if you want to put it on the screen, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah.
And while Ruth is doing that, I just also want to say that, I do thank the Education Subcommittee. Really, truly, they have a shared goal for all students and families to feel heard, valued, and represented in our Shrewsbury Public Schools through all aspects of their education. So, just wanted to say that. Okay, so I guess I'll start with the problem statement, which is threaded throughout our 4 recommendations, is to ensure that all children and families feel included in all places and spaces in public schools and other Shrewsbury departments. Truly, our focus is primarily the public schools. So recommendation number 1, we have 4 recommendations total. Recommendation number 1 of 4 is to increase diversity in all staff across Shrewsbury Public Schools. So our recommendations are within that one is provide ongoing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging training for all staff and new hires, including anti-racism training, offer differentiated training opportunities depending on where educators are on the continuum of racial bias and understanding. Recommend anti-racist training for new hires. Consider adding a line in the contract to disavow racism and bias, and include a section in the employee handbook that disavows racism and bias. And so then for our deliverables and success criteria, for result number 1, beginning in the 2022-23 school year for the next 5 years, increase diversity of the candidate pool by 5% year over year. By the 2025-26 school year, at least 40% of the candidate pool will be diverse, with the goal of having a 5% increase in the diversity of staff year over year for the next 5 years. Result 2, by January 2022, inclusive language will be used for all job postings. Result 3, by September 2022, conduct a comprehensive review of district documents, including staff handbooks and employee contracts when in negotiations, to ensure language to disavow racism. And then recommendation number 2, focus on all families in Shrewsbury Public Schools. So our solutions or recommendations for a plan: implement strategies which engage families and make all families welcome. Building principals should encourage diverse participation at PTO and school events and all school events. Provide language translations for all reports shared with families to ensure full participation. Include interpreters at family events when possible. Ensure meetings which involve SPS include translations and closed captions. Include more multicultural events in the schools and at PTO meetings. Review the fee structure for schools and town activities to ensure all families can be included. Offer a sliding scale fee for students on free and reduced lunch program for schools and town activities. solicit donations and or use monies donated to the Colonial Connections Fund to be used for families who cannot meet the fees for schools and town activities. And as far as deliverables, results, reduce overall fees charged to families, develop a sliding scale fee structure for all school district fees for the 2022-23 academic year, conduct a review of the current language access plan by 2022-23 school year and present findings to the school committee for recommendations and improvements. Create a pool of parent/caregiver volunteers willing to assist with translations at various schools and district-wide events. And the fourth, building principals and PTOs shall review measures to encourage increasing participation by diverse families. Recommendation number 3, focus on all students in Shrewsbury Public Schools. Recommendations within that: equal access to all curriculum by gen ed students, special ed students, and English language learners. Regularly engage with students regarding the climate in their schools, classrooms, and school activities. Continue to collect and review demographic data on who is receiving special education services, participating in sports, on the honor roll, taking AP courses, and participating in clubs. Continue to review and adjust curriculum materials to ensure diverse voices are present. And how we're going to ask them to do that. Number 1, all students receive ongoing anti-bias and implicit bias training going forward from the 2022-23 school year. Number 2, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging added to all harassment and bullying policies by the 2022-23 school year. Number 3, data collected shows an increase in diverse participants in sports, honor roll, AP courses, and clubs by the 2022-23 school year. And then number 4, districts shall develop a plan to ensure that age-appropriate anti-bias and implicit bias curriculum components are added to the K-12 curriculum and shall report out annually to the school committee. And then our final recommendation, work in partnership with and parallel to the Shrewsbury Public Schools senior leadership team. So how we're going to do that: 1, data from the Panorama survey, which is a survey that the SPS put out last spring, will be collected and presented to school committee and to the community at large. Data from the Panorama survey will be analyzed in 2021-22 school year to support improvement. The DEI task force survey results will be reviewed by the Shrewsbury Public Schools senior leadership team. Shrewsbury Public Schools will continue to provide needed professional development for staff throughout the 2021-22 school year and beyond. And then the deliverables, number 1, ensure the district continues to address diversity and develop concrete plans that can be implemented so the entire SPS community is a community of belonging. Number 2, using the Panorama survey results, conduct a gap analysis between where the district is today and where the district wants to be in 3 years. From this, create an action plan for areas that need more focus and attention. This data can be measured year over year using this year's data as a baseline. Number 3, staff shall receive ongoing professional development based on the Panorama survey insights. And number 4, members of the DEI task force and members of the SPS senior leadership team will meet by April 2022 to discuss the results of the DEI task force survey and create an action plan for areas that need more focus and attention. And those are our recommendations. I'll be happy.
Thanks, Maura. So before we start taking questions, comments, I actually have a question for the group. So not every subcommittee use the same format as the one that Maura, you just went over with the recommendations and then the success criteria. So question, should we keep, so we have to reformat everything obviously so it looks similar, right? But should we keep it with the format, like should we keep more as the education's the way it is, or should we remove that success criteria? Because I don't think any other groups includes those. I don't want to remove them because it looks like you guys put a lot of work into them. And I don't think it would look bad, right? I don't think it would look bad if we left them in there because they're self-explanatory and, you know, easy to read.
I mean, could we make it like a narrative? I mean, like maybe take out the headings, I guess, and then I would hate to get rid of them, honestly.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Lose it. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, so I take it back. We'll just leave them, and yours will just be a little bit different.
Well, I could also reformat it to look, you know,
okay.
Employment subcommittee has that.
I was going to say, I hate to jump in here, but ours is exactly like that. So.
Okay, so I apologize. Okay.
No, that's okay, but I'm happy to redo it, reformat it in a way that is uniform.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Those are just details that we can take care of. So I was speaking with Adiola over the break, and we're not going to rewrite any of this, right? We're going to do a lot of editing. And then where the bulk of our work will come in is writing the general recommendations, which right now we only have a couple. And then the overarching, you know, what we worked on, etc. So with that being said, I'll open it up. I don't see any hands up. Oh, Rich, you have your hand up? No?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I was trying to get back to the mute button. Sorry. No, just a small thing, something we struggled with on your first section. Well, I'm looking at the older one.
Losing you. Am I the only one that's losing him?
No,
I'm sorry.
I thought it was me.
Is this any better?
Yep, that's better.
Okay, my microphone. On the first one, your first deliverable, we struggled this in the employment. The 40% of the candidate pool will be diverse.
Yeah, we that's our old one. We did too. We struck that one. So our new one is.
Oh, I thought I was looking at the updated.
Well, so we rephrased it. I shouldn't. So
am I not looking at
the next one? You might. Oh, yes, you are. Yeah. So yeah, we had it even more strict than that. We just you know, we want this to be a priority, right? So this is a recommendation, and I mean, kind of, it's not like we just kind of threw it out there, but just kind of like we want them to know that this is really important. That this is a focus that they need.
No, I don't disagree. It's just the use of a percentage was what we were struggling with. And I said we kind of worded it towards matching like the Worcester County demographics and stuff like that. So I'm just saying, from our perspective, well, I'm speaking for the employment committee. Anyone else on the committee could chime in, but from our perspective, yeah, we all agree that it needs to be more diverse, and they need more diverse applicants. It's just more, how do we quantify that? And the point being that from the employment standpoint, the schools are going to drive the overall numbers just because of the number of people employed. So it just may be something we could try to make a little more consistent between them somehow, between the two recommendations.
Between yours and ours, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Because what does 40% of the candidate pool will be diverse mean?
Well, can I chime in here to kind of speak to your question, Richard? Because we did have a lot of talk about this at our last meeting. But I remember when we met with Barb Malone earlier on in the spring, she mentioned that primarily they go through school spring Am I saying that right? The website for
You're cutting
hiring
out.
teachers.
Yes.
So I'm losing Adiola. Is anybody else?
I'm losing.
Nope, I got it.
So can I ask if you're not, if you don't plan to speak, or even if you do, can you shut off your video? That seems to help, at least with my bandwidth. I'm sorry to have to ask, but
Can you guys, I'm sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yep,
now
we
I
can
can.
hear you.
That's much better.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, maybe I just need to talk closer to the mic. So when we met with Barb Malone in the spring, she mentioned that most of the hiring candidates for teachers in Shrewsbury Public Schools come from, I believe it's called School Spring. That's where they primarily look at candidates. And she did have numbers. She said that School Spring just started reporting on their racial data, and the pool was about 95, 96% white, and white women, something that high. So we spoke with them, they already have plans to kind of look at other avenues of hiring pools. They talked a lot about different groups. There's a diversity in education group in Massachusetts that kind of has a large pool of diverse candidates, and other ways of kind of diversifying teaching pools, maybe going to the colleges, looking at affinity groups like multicultural clubs and Black student unions, things of that sort to recruit. So, there are ways to diversify the pool, and they're actually looking into it. And we did want to throw a number out there to say, hey, right now your pool is maybe 95% white. Maybe work on a goal to get it to 40% white. 40% folks of color or 40% non-white, so that there is some kind of a benchmark, to a goal to look at. And we didn't want to go with a low number, because we wanted to make sure that the recommendation came out as a very strong, like a strong view from us that this is something that's important, that we want to see change. And it's something that's important, not just for our students of color, but the white students too, all students.
Yeah, and I can also, we did spend a lot of time talking about that. And I can also tell you that Barb Malone, who's the Director of Human Resources in Shrewsbury Public Schools, recently sent out that there will be a DESE teacher diversification professional learning community, of which Shrewsbury is a part of it, of which Barb is a part of it. And actually, I just was accepted to be a part of that. So there's truly going to be a focus about how to, from the state level, how can we help to diversify our pool of applicants? So it's in the works. I mean, I get your understanding, your question about the number, the percent, but we did talk about it, and we, as Adiela said, we feel like let's put the bar high. I get Navjeet.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I see that none of the recommendations, or even perhaps the problem statement, deals with any potential issues with instructional content or practices. I'm just wondering if you'd like to kind of explain that. It seems that there's nothing that you're not making any recommendations in that space. I know personally that we have even attempted to advocate at the state level that there is often need for greater kind of understanding of different cultures and religions and different geographies, partly because of the world we are living in, but also because a lot of them are here with us. Or they are us, let's put it this way. They are not with us. I'm one of them. So I'm a little surprised not to see any reference to that in the problem statement or recommendations?
Thank you for that, Navjeet. So maybe we're not clear enough. And recommendation number 3, focus on all students in Shrewsbury Public Schools. Continue to review and adjust curriculum materials to ensure diverse voices are present. And then the result, the district shall develop a plan to ensure that age-appropriate anti-bias and implicit bias curriculum components are added to the K-12 curriculum and shall report out annually. So maybe we need to change our wording, but that was our intent of those 2 pieces. And if anyone else from the committee wants to jump in, I mean, that's certainly our intent, Navjeet. So if that's not clear, that's something that we definitely need to look at to make it more clear.
Can I jump in, Maura?
Yep.
This is Lindsay. I think we were trying to walk a line. The Shrewsbury Public Schools had a DEI task force. It wasn't called a task force, Maura. It was a committee, I think, looking and working on these issues. And I think we were trying to complement their work, and that much of that sits the idea of what is taught in the classroom. In many ways, while making recommendations they should continue that work, is maybe best left to some professional educators who are trained and skilled in that, and that what we could do is supplement and add and make sure that the spaces were good, that that we have the right teachers in the rooms, that we're involving parents. And so while it's absolutely worth mentioning and talking about, so it's in here, we don't say exactly how to do that, right? How to make sure that people of all sorts of different backgrounds are represented, but that's, I think, the direction which we were sort of taking from early on.
So I just like to make a suggestion. So thank you, actually, Lindsay. I was wondering if that was partly the case, and that's, I feel in which case it might be appropriate, one, to make a specific reference to the task force in the schools.
Very good idea. Very good idea.
And the second would be, I feel kind of we probably want to be clearer about potentially, or maybe I guess we are clear. I'm just wondering, be more explicit about engaging parents around that topic. Or so just as an example, I think in the employment group, we've actually talked about, I think, and I saw that in the public safety group also, they talked about a engagement committee. And I'm wondering if there is room for that, or perhaps the PTA itself is a space for that, assuming it's diverse enough. So those are a couple of suggestions here.
Thank you, Navjeet.
Thanks, Navjeet. Paula, you're up. Paula, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I didn't hear you say me. I thought it was somebody else. So I don't really understand recommendation 4. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is if what you're saying is assuming that there will continue to be a DEI committee or task force in the future, they will work with the school to combine what both surveys have learned or both research has learned, or are you talking about right now? I just was a little bit confused as to what that 4th one is all about.
I think we were assuming that the DEI committee will continue as a separate, as everyone else has suggested. Because if not, we need to have a space where the DEI task force can talk about the results of the survey with the senior leadership team at the Shrewsbury Public Schools senior leadership team, which is separate than this report. Obviously, it's a survey that you created, Paula. So we thought the place for that should be, later so that there's a little bit more time, and with working under the assumption that there will be continue to have a DEI committee through the Board of Selectmen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think in terms of the diversification of the workforce, I would like to see a diversification of the leadership team. Because I don't see that right now. That would be the other thing I would say in terms of recommendations. And I agree with Navjeet that I think we need to be more specific about anything that's curriculum based or instructional versus just personnel. Personnel is a big one, but I think the other one's got to be there too.
Thanks, Paula. Deb, you have your hand up.
Deb, you have your hand up. You can go.
Okay, thank you. The curriculum is somewhat under control of districts, but the curriculum is also state. We have frameworks that we need to follow. So, you can pick different books and you can present it, but we do have guidelines that are given to us, the same as all communities in the state of Massachusetts. And I think DESE is looking at that as we speak. They're doing a lot of work around this. If you go on their website, they're doing a lot, but easier said than done.
Navjeet, I think you had your hand raised again.
You're on mute, Navjeet.
You're on mute.
Deb, I feel there's considerable degree of freedom within the framework. And in terms of the kind of, as you said yourself, the texts you use, the references you use, the activities you incorporate. And I feel that that discretion or that freedom can be exercised here. Personally, I feel the framework is somewhat constrained in certain areas, but even in spite of that, there is significant degree of freedom available.
Najee, I agree. I agree with what you're saying very much so. And I do think that one of the things that does constrain all districts is some of the frameworks. And I think that needs to be addressed. With that said, it is the individual district's decision on what textbooks they choose to buy, what novels they choose to read. And there is there's a lot of flexibility there.
Lindsay, you have your hand raised.
Thanks, Adiola. I just wonder for the committee at large, while I don't disagree with the comment about the diversity and hiring at the public schools should also include looking at our leadership team, I wonder if that might be one of the recommendations we want to be a broader recommendation, that it might be true across the leadership of many of our areas of town government, and certainly I think something to consider about what are the ways the town can encourage more people. I noticed Kelly's comment about appointed boards and commissions, but even who runs for public offices, like how can we make leadership in the town of Shrewsbury more diverse, both employed, appointed, and elected. And so we could call out the schools as they have work to do, but I wonder if there's actually a broader statement we might want to be making as a committee. And Paula, I like agreeing with you. That makes me feel good. Thank you.
This is Adiola. I actually agree with that as well. I would love to make diversifying town officials and employees at every level more diverse.
This is Navjeet. I'd like to add to that. I feel that improving the diversity of the leadership is definitely part of it. But I think another part is also that unless our recommendations have to, the risk is that our recommendations will sound very much like compliance unless the leadership itself shows that it and embraces diversity, embraces equity, and they have to demonstrate in their day-to-day actions, the leadership of various organizations and of the town, that they mean. So it's not just in who's there, but in kind of the actions that are taken on a regular basis and how they reach out and how they incorporate and how they include everybody. So I feel I love the idea of having a recommendation like that also.
Paula, you had your hand raised?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think part of that challenge, and we've talked about this before, and I don't know how it goes into the recommendations, but is that it's a chicken or the egg kind of, because people, diverse people are not showing up at these meetings and these places where you get seen to be put on a committee. The hiring, I think, is all about where you recruit. I know even in my own company, I've been talking about Handshake, which is a site that goes directly to all the colleges, and you can pick which colleges to recruit from. So if you really wanted to get a more diverse population, you just look at the schools that have a higher population in that demographic, which with Naviance they can easily do. So I think that's fairly easy. But when it comes to the town boards and stuff, it really is the same 5 people show up all the time, and that's who ends up getting recognized and moved forward. So we really have to do some work. I think that's where one of the goals of a diversity committee that was moving forward be to really connect, or one that's got representation from all different groups across the town, to be able to really push to have people show up to really want to step up and volunteer.
Paula, I think you're totally right. I mean, I think it's unfortunately people have been not as well supported in making those efforts in the past. So I think there's a bit of
yeah, I agree.
Not apathy, but just feeling defeated and how to muster it up again.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
So I didn't see any more hands up. Are there any more comments for the education subcommittee? Okay, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is just an opportunity for everybody to ask questions and comments in general. Does anybody have any questions for Adiola and I? So we were talking in the short break that we had before the education subcommittee presented, and we'd really like a call for at least one member, preferably either the co-chair or chair of each of the subcommittees, to be present with us when we present in front of the board on the 19th. So if you guys can please make it every effort, and I encourage everyone to attend. I assume, Beth, correct me if I'm wrong, that it will be in person at Town Hall. Otherwise,
You're correct. It will be in person at Town Hall, and everyone would have to be masked at this point.
Yeah, great. So please, we really encourage anybody that can attend to attend, but we're really calling for at least one member of each of the subcommittees to come in, in case any of the board members have any specific questions about any of the recommendations specific to the subcommittees.
Agree. Just to elaborate on that, for example, Jenny, Kelly, you guys spoke so eloquently about some of those public safety recommendations that your subcommittee brought up. So it would be really nice to have, the originators of these recommendations and proposals, just be there to speak to in depth to the origin and any questions or research that went into the recommendations, and just to kind of just shed more light on it, because Ruth and I can be there, but obviously we won't do a good job as well of a job speaking to some of those specific subcommittee proposals as you all did previously. So thank you, and just let us know as well who from your groups will be able to join on October 19th, just so we can get an RSVP and we can know what to expect.
Thanks, Ariola. So the next agenda item is just discussing the format of the final report. Like I mentioned earlier, we really don't intend to change any of the language, right? Maybe some editing, formatting to make it all cohesive. So Ariola and I and Kelly will be working on the front part of the report, and then we'll send it off to everybody, and we'll meet on, I think, in 2 weeks. So we have it here that we will send it to you guys on the 27th, which is in 2 weeks from tonight. And if you guys could have that whole week to review it and come prepared with discussion on October 4th. And hopefully there won't be too much that you would want changed. If you do have comments prior to that meeting, you can always email us, as long as you're just emailing Adiola and myself and not the entire group. That would be great. Navjeet, you have your hand up, go for it.
So thank you. This is Navjeet. So we discussed briefly, for example, the recommendation about continuing the DEI task force in some form or the other. So I would again, I feel that there may be other such thoughts, that there may be room for generalized recommendations that might not sort of make their way into the narrow realm of a particular subcommittee, and things that we might not have discussed. Are you already planning that? Or if not, I would recommend you do so.
So we've been asking all along for everybody to send along their recommendations from the broader group, as well as resources for us to put on that landing page. That's going to be a general recommendation. I assume that the landing page, I keep calling it a landing page, that's the terminology we use at work, but what we were thinking is the page right now that exists for the DEI, that's part of the Shrewsbury town site. It has all the meeting info, and it has, the DEI members, et cetera. Our charge is at the top. I assume that will be replaced with what I have envisioned as a resource landing site for residents that includes resource links to different areas, housing, healthcare, public safety, et cetera. So right now we only have 2 general recommendations, which is that landing page and then the permanent DEI committee. We can discuss, we only have 8 minutes. If people have other things in mind, please send us an email. Make sure you email Adiola and myself. Navjeet, do you have anything in particular that you're thinking about?
Yes, so there's at least one couple of topics we discussed in the employment subcommittee. We weren't sure, it didn't necessarily fall into that realm. One is that while we definitely addressed diversity in terms of employment, I'm sure that the town and affiliated organizations contract out and purchase a number of services and products. And so having diversity, making sure that we are also addressing that in terms of our procurement policies and contracts would be one such space. Similarly, we are talking about, whether it's employment or whether it's, let's say we've talked about public safety or but other services are also provided to residents. And if there is sort of any kind of issue in how the services are provided to help improve the quality of services to the diverse residents of the town, that's an area that I don't think, I think even we didn't really discuss, but that's a topic that I was thinking about here also.
Okay, so those two things seem pretty heavy. I don't want to add them without some sort of background information. Are those two things that you'd be willing to work with us on the language for?
Absolutely. And so I recognize that at this stage, without kind of deeper, sort of more background work, we may not be able to make a definitive recommendation to say we must do this or we shall do this, but at least we can make a recommendation that we should consider, we should look at the current status of, let's say, contracts and see how we can ensure that we, so yes, the short answer is be glad to work with you.
Okay, and also that I would assume that we would have to, so we could definitely put it in the report, which will be a draft, but when we send it out to the team and then we meet on the 4th, we'll probably have to put that to a vote whether or not everybody accepts that as part of the
Of course, no, I totally understand that.
Yeah, just so everyone is aware as well, when this is sent back to you, I don't think we'll be voting on the recommendations for the subcommittees, but definitely I would assume some discussion on the general recommendations.
Absolutely, yeah, no, and I yes, I totally understand, because otherwise, kind of, we at least, if nothing else, we should at least recognize that we may not have covered certain areas or certain topics.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we have to come to terms with that, right? It has been almost a year, but
yes,
that really is not a long time, right? Like, hopefully this will be an ongoing, continuing effort and part of the town and the residents.
Ruth, can I add something to that? I'm completely in agreement. And on the state side, know that DBE in my daytime job is a supplier diversity is a really great way to make impact, and we as a town spend a lot of money, and so it's a good question to be asking. But that might turn into one of those reasons to say we need to continue some sort of ongoing task force to continue to have an opportunity for these things to be raised, even though, to your point, Ruth, we didn't explore that, and we had a whole year and we tried to take on the sort of the highlight items, but there's a lot more to continue. So it may even be part of that reason to keep this work going, right?
I like that, Lindsay, kind of nesting that under the permanent DEI, under the reason for the permanent DEI committee. Okay, Jean, you're up next, and we only have a few minutes left, so if anybody has any final things, please let us know.
I'd just like to add.
You're on mute, Jean. You unmuted yourself, but then you muted yourself again. There you go. Nope, you keep doing it. There you go.
Unmuted.
There you go.
Okay. One comment on contracts. This town has control of contracts under $50,000. Above the $50,000, it's all controlled by the state rules and regulations. And we do have a diversity statement when we're purchasing.
That's great info. Thanks, Jean. Any last questions? All right, so make sure if you guys have any final thoughts to email both Adiola and myself. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
This is
A
Paula.
motion to adjourn.
Too many people at the same time.
I second.
Who was the first?
This is Paula. It was me or Jenny. Either one. Doesn't matter.
Pick one.
Thanks, me. We need it for the notes, so,
I wrote Paula, so.
okay. Thanks, Maura. Okay, well, everybody have a good evening.
Thank you.
You too.
Thanks, everyone.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Have a great
Good
evening.
night. Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye.